Setting fires is not protesting. None of this is protesting. It's lawlessness, plain and simple. And those who do it should be prosecuted. Violence will not bring change. It'll only bring destruction.
But they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop. And this is a movement, I'm telling you. They're not going to stop. And everyone beware, because they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels, that they're not going to let up, and they should not. And we should not.
Trying to interfere in our election. But they're not the only ones. We take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And sadly, the domestic enemies to our voting system and our honoring our Constitution are right at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue with their allies in the Congress of the United States. But again, let's just get out there and mobilize, organize.
You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives. And unfortunately, there's plenty to go around.
In an August 28th Atlantic op-ed titled "This is How Biden Loses," author George Packer makes the case that in order for Biden to win in November, he must forcefully push back against rioting in Democrat-run cities. The author writes about how he thinks Republicans have finally found a talking point that sticks to the Biden campaign. The author says, quote, "Kenosha has placed Democrats in a trap. They've embraced the protest and the causes that drive them. The third night of the Democratic convention was consumed with the language and imagery of protest, as if all Americans watching were activists." His answer? Joe Biden and Kamala Harris should pretend like they hate riots. I can agree with the author that the Democrat marriage between violent protests throughout the summer has been an unforced error that will surely play into Republican hands. I can also agree that Joe and Kamala are political chameleons, and if any two politicians would attempt to put this genie back in a bottle, it would be those two. But there's a tiny problem. The veil that Democrats used to mask their extremism came off long ago. Way before Black Lives Matter or Antifa first took to the streets, long before Trump's rise to the presidency, Democrats were forming their ties with extremist anti-American ideas. So where can we start? You would be amazed to see how history connects our past and our future. Today we will focus on one aspect of these extremist ties, the ultimate scapegoat, that is Black America. Such an example can be found in a book written in 1958 by a Black man named Manning Johnson, titled Color, Communism, and Common Sense. In the book, Manning Johnson lays out his own personal experiences within the communist secret cells in America, and how communists used what he refers to as the political dupe, also known as the Negro. It explains how communist forces were able to infiltrate churches, communities, and Black left-wing movements, not for solidarity, but for the subversion of America itself. He speaks of how he was lured into this radical movement by a front organization that was set up to take advantage of disaffected Black youth, saying,
"I was lured into the Red Movement by way of the American Negro Labor Congress, one of the many front organizations set up by the communists to trap the naive, unweary, unsuspecting, and idealistic Negro. The use of such attractive and appealing fronts as a means of entrapment is a most important serpentine method by the Reds."
He explains how racial strife, tension, bitterness, and constant focus on inequity was a driving force for the Communist Party within Black America. In other words, racial hate was a necessity to further the agenda. I am not saying that racial divides do not exist today. I am referring to what we see in American society as the left feeds the bloated pig of constant racial strife. He even mentions the role of the media, which will sound particularly familiar to you, the viewer. Manning explains how the liberal left within media would go overboard in giving top news coverage to racial incidents, and also those incidents that are interpreted so as to show biased attitudes of whites against Negroes. Manning said,
"This is a propaganda hoax aimed at not helping the Negro, but casting America in a bad light in order to destroy prestige and influence abroad."
The book even explains how Black leaders looking to climb the ladder of success a little faster were used as frontmen to bait the Black population to be led astray. In return for money and preferred treatment, these men became what Manning refers to as race leaders. And as the race leaders rose, the book continues to explain how white leftists descended on Negro communities like locusts, posing as friends come to help liberate their Black brothers. They may no longer refer to themselves as the Red Army, but the actions being taken now and then are uncanny. Two different eras in time, the same agenda remains. While many believe that the secret cells of the Red Army simply dissipated after the era of McCarthyism during the 40s and 50s, what we see today paints a different story. A story that demonstrates that even the remnants of the Red Army have never been completely swept away. What is even more fascinating is how the need for the Black man or woman to keep the agenda alive is astonishingly similar to today. Manning said it best.
Deep in the swamp of inferiority, lack of ability, muddled thought, the Negro intelligentsia looks to the phony white liberals, politicians, and progressive hypocrites for leadership, guidance, and money.
No amount of media manipulation or political backtracking can separate the Democrat Party from its extremist roots. Color communism and common sense merely lays out one of the many roots of this. History is an eerie reminder of how the past, the present, and the future are connected. Suddenly, those who are looking carefully discover that secret cells are still lingering and are no longer secret. They're in plain sight, in the halls of our government, wearing suits, holding press conferences, and yes, running for the President of the United States. Names have changed, labels have shifted, but they're still looking for the unsuspecting and naive Negro. And they're still deploying the anarchists and hellraisers disguised as white angels of mercy to stir up the perfect storm that can push a nation over the edge. For more news and commentary, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, under Red River TV. You can also find us at 46 News. I'm Janelle Batts.
Little did I realize until I was deeply enmeshed in the red conspiracy that just in seeming grievances are exploited to transform idealism into a cold and ruthless weapon against the capitalist system.
I think that the criticism is helpful. I also think that it might, I think of a lot of things. The first thing I think is that we actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories